Hi, I'm Sally Lehman, and I'm with The Advocate. Today I'm speaking to Oregon State University doctoral student Devon about a paper she wrote that is somewhat involving the eastern spadefoot toad. Hi, Anne. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for asking me.
So you are a graduate student at Oregon State University. What is your field of study?
So I study wildlife biology by and large, but I dabble in a lot of other things that are unrelated to my field as well. But I would say, yeah, wildlife biology.
According to the OSU press release, you upended the conventional wisdom of a century on how to determine how many eastern spadefoot toads there are in an area. Can you
Correct.
tell me how they used to count toads?
So it's not really about the numbers. I think people, in that range understand that they can occur in really high numbers and you can find them on certain nights. But I think people were looking for them only when really heavy rains came about. So they would migrate to ponds and start breeding and making a lot of noise. So the males, call out for to attract females for mating, and that's how people find really large numbers of them. But I was finding them on dry nights with no precipitation, no rain, and I was just hundreds and hundreds of these in weather that you're not supposed to find them in. The sort of prevailing wisdom is that you can find them easily on nights where the weather conditions are optimal, and I was finding them almost every single night.
And you did this using something called spotlighting. Can you describe that?
Yeah, it's super simple. I think most of us have done it in our cars when we see deer looking back at us. So it's exactly what it is, where you shine the light and it reflects back from the animal's eyes into you. It works well for nocturnal animals. I'm sure you've seen it for cats and deer. For frogs, it's a little bit harder to see. You have to train your eyes to detect them, and yet you need to put a headlamp, just a regular headlamp that anyone could use, fairly near your eyes so that it will reflect back to you in a way that it's obvious. If the angle or placement is wrong, sometimes you just see spiders and insects and you don't see frogs.
Why did you try this different methodology?
That's how I learned how to do it, actually. So I didn't know that people out here didn't really do it to find frogs. So back home, I'm from Singapore, and I've done a bunch of work in Southeast Asia on frogs, and that's how I was taught to find them. And by and large, it's really hard to find them in the canopy and really areas with high vegetation and a lot of plants that you don't spotlight. So that was just natural to me. I just did it, and I assumed everyone else did as well. So when I came out here to the US, I was surprised that spotlighting isn't traditionally used for finding frogs in the forests.
Changing the method of finding them, what were you able to prove about the frogs?
So they are not as secretive as they are widely believed to be. So the idea is that they're subterranean. They hang out underground and dig burrows, which is true. That's what they do. They live in burrows, but they actually come out from the ground far more often than people thought. So we have a few. Researchers have found a few sites where they do come up very regularly, but they actually track them. And these have been published, maybe in the past decade. But even with those publications, people sort of didn't get the idea that they come out really regularly on the surface. And you should be able to find them. You should be able to just pick them off the forest floor if the habitat is suitable.
The eastern spadefoot toad is listed as a conservation concern in the northern regions of the east coast of America. Has this changed at all with this new methodology?
Unlikely to. I think they will still be, they're still endangered in those ranges. They're still very difficult to find, and their ranges might be quite limited in the northern areas. My sites were in Virginia where they're not threatened. So I don't think that they will be, changed in status or anything in the Northeast. It's just that we now have the methods to find them more often and actually monitor the populations. Most of the listings on species, most of the listings on this species are not based on population estimates, where you should actually go out and sample and count numbers. So we don't have population estimates. They're listed based on sort of difficulty to find rather than actual numbers.
The spotlighting happened in Rhode Island and Virginia, and yet you are receiving additional recognition here in the Pacific Northwest for teaching a lesson on confirmation bias. Can you define that?
So confirmation bias is sort of interpreting your data that or information that you see in a way that confirms what you previously believed. So for these frogs, confirmation bias in the sense of people find them very easily, once a year in breeding pools, and you can find them very easily then when it's raining. And the fact that people are not spotlighting, so they don't see them outside of the rainy season, it just sort of propels this myth that they're only findable in rainy conditions. So that sort of additional confirmation that you do see them in rainy seasons, you don't see them when it's not raining. It sort of confirms the bias that they're difficult to find outside of rain, which our study proves is not true.
Your paper ended up being more about why researchers should keep an open mind.
Yeah, I think it's all of us should. I welcome people to read my paper and tear it apart and criticize it as well. And nothing would make me happier than for any of my research to be proven wrong. And I think we should open our mind to not everything you read and that is prevailing wisdom is correct, and you should always just poke away at it and see if it's true or not. And that's how science works. It's very iterative. So we like tried and true methods that may have worked in the 1940s. We shouldn't stick to them as our bread and butter. We should definitely explore as many different options as possible.
What are you pursuing as your doctoral thesis?
So I'm looking at the spread of information and disease in animal networks. So I work on a few different systems, including frogs, these frogs out here, eastern spadefoots, and African buffalo with the lab that I'm at in integrated biology, and also looking at drivers of the global wildlife trade networks.
I also heard that you are involved in a group about writing policy for sexual harassment on campus. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I think our policies on campus and countrywide, statewide should be continually, iteratively examined to make sure that they meet the requirements of what the laws say, and also treat people ethically. So I'm very involved in trying to make sure that we match our commitments to following these rules and compliances with action.
Previously, we spoke with Dr. Anna Spalding about the inequality and racism that tends to happen within the STEM fields. Have you faced anything like that?
Yes, for sure. I think any person who's any person of color, especially if you're a woman or have either other minoritized identities, have experienced this to some varying degree. So yes, but also at the same time, I have fantastic support and networking within my own labs at OSU and in the College of Science. So I would say it's like a lot of good and a lot of bad. And anybody who enters the STEM field with minoritized identities should expect to face these barriers. Unfortunately, they're not going away for quite some time.
Thank you for your time.
Awesome, thank you.